So the latest episode of Bleach has dropped, and man, it was a good one, as always. So we start things off with a new Ritter V, with this Lee guy here, and his ability is the fact that he's able to not only vanish and disappear, but he's able to erase his existence from your subconscious. So it's kind of hard to go after him. As Yachiru was trying to do, she couldn't tell whether or not if she hit him or not. His power, as he calls the vanishing point. Yachiru has a power that surprisingly can deal with this. Now, before we actually get into that in a more detail, what I'm going to start doing now, especially in these episodes that have big fights and the fights like the whole episode, we're going to actually start making and talking about the differences of what was shown on the episode versus what actually happens in the light novel. Now, of course, I'll really just touch on the big differences, not necessarily the little ones, because a lot of little things can happen. But let's start off with this. I don't think the show actually did a really good job of explaining her power or what she's able to do. So it did introduce and it did show these two monsters, and it did show that they too have blades and attacks. After she gives this explanation, it just kind of transitions to the next thing. But one thing that I want to get across to you guys, her power actually was the best counter to this guy. What she's able to do is, as she swings her sword, there is a monster. One of the monsters attacks before her sword, and one monster attacks after her sword. So as she's swinging, there's already a sword being swung. And even if they dodge that, there's a sword in the aftermath that can be hit as well. One thing about this episode they did do is kind of condense it so that way they can actually make a full story, if you will, between her fight and Kenny's fight that comes up later. So with the fact that everything's condensed, they didn't really spend time explaining this, I think, in great detail. So hopefully, by my explanation here, you guys can understand a little bit more about her power and to why she was able to actually cut the guy, because even if he dodged her physical sword that he could see, but the monster's swords, you can't actually see them as they're swinging. So thus, he actually got hit by one of the monster swords that came before her strike. And if you're able to dodge it, sometimes you get hit by after the strike. So that probably is a lot easier to digest. It is then revealed that the true Stern Ritter is Gremmy, the Visionary. Gremmy's power is that he's able to, whatever he imagines or envisions will come true. So the previous Stern Ritter that we thought was Lee, the Vanishing Point, he's actually a byproduct of Gremmy's imagination and was never true to begin with. So thus, this guy who truly has a power, because whatever you imagine to happen comes true. Yet he, of course, says that this is a strength, but honestly, I personally think it's a weakness, because can you just imagine, pun intended, that the things that you go through on a daily basis, that anything you can think of would come true? No matter what it is, it would just happen. And there's a lot of times that you, as a person, just think of things on a whim. And if those whims came true, that would be a problem. You would have to have a lot of self-control to make sure what you envision and what you think of would actually be something that would be helpful and important. But yet and still, this guy uses his imagination as a means to fight. And so, of course, he claims he's the strongest, yet Kenpachi's like, I too am the strongest. Let's battle. And yet, and still, we know how the result of this battle goes. But a few points I do want to bring up about it. Can we just talk about how cool this is right here? For once, here we are, we have Kenpachi with a Shikai. His sword just absolutely blows up, and thus the reason why this episode is called The Edge, because there's an edge on that one. Like, look at this meat cleaver, which honestly, given the word meat cleaver, feels like it's nowhere near the power that this thing holds. Like, the amount of strength you have to literally carry this thing, let alone if you were battling with this, him going to his regular sword form, it would feel like, yeah, he's fighting with a twig all the time that literally can cut through things. Very cool and very awesome. Especially the fact that he just literally cut through a meteor. And did you see the smile on his face when he saw what a meteor was for the first time? And he's like, huh, let's see if we can cut it. And yet and still, he could cut through it. Ah, just the joy he had. And he's like, I am the true Kenpachi. The fact that he dealt with Unohara, and that Unohara, who was truly the Kenpachi previously, but he is now the Kenpachi from one, killing her, and two, releasing the shackles and holds he had on himself from finding a worthy adversary. Now, he is truly, truly unleashed. Gremmy just stood no chance at all, which comes to Gremmy's demise. Now, as we had seen, Gremmy saw Kenpachi as a monster, which of course is his imagination. And because he imagined Kenpachi as a monster, he too wanted to win. So he was like, you know what? I want to become stronger than said monster. So thus you see his body falling apart, realizing, oh, I just killed myself, and in a way, self-destructed himself. Even though it showed this image, the manga, I believe, did a better job of showing him in this form, if you will, because you can kind of infer what happens here with the fact that, as with the fingers, of course, splitting apart and such. But the manga shows him in a different light. He absolutely seems and looks like a monster, but then it's like his shoulder and his arms are actually splitting apart. Then you can see, oh, yeah, he really did himself dirty now. Because he then realized after he was defeated, oh, so your power can only happen because of your body. And I just kind of destroyed myself. The final reveal that Gremmy, who we had been seeing up to this point, was not his true form. He really is a brain in a jar. And this was what was his true form this whole time. Yet and still, the form that we saw, Gremmy, was like an after image of what he imagined. Like, all of that you have to really think of. Him imagining his own body, and that his own body can receive cuts or needs to be hardened, or you know, all that stuff that happened in this fight. Yet he was just a brain. And of course, as he said, he didn't need to lift a finger to attack, fight, or whatever. Yeah, he didn't have to lift a finger because he isn't a finger, he's a brain. But it didn't matter. The fact that he imagined that he would try to be stronger than Kenpachi and then splitting himself apart is probably a physical showing of what happened mentally, as that he was trying to imagine himself stronger than Kenpachi, and then he just kind of split apart. So yes, it's actually a sad end, because you're sitting here like, all right, this is gonna be a good fight, this is gonna be a good fight, and then he just accidentally dies by his own hands. And as a viewer, I'm sitting here like, dang, that was underwhelming. I'm sure Kenpachi's sitting there like, dang, I wanted to fight. And that's the reason why Kenpachi just called him, you fool. Overall, a great fight, a great moment, a lot of good moments here, especially with Yachiru and her manifestation of her ability, as well as Kenpachi releasing his Shikai. And then the fight's over after he releases the Shikai. Didn't really even get to use it a whole lot, but thus, that only means that if Kenpachi defeats a Stern Ritter in this fight, then it's only going to be more Kenpachi fighting in the future. So I await and look forward to that. Overall, a great episode, and man, Bleach is still coming up with some mighty good fights. For the future, stay tuned. Definitely try to bring a analysis of what has happened here in this fight and what has happened in the light novel. So then that way, for those that are just anime watchers, you can understand a little bit better. So thus, when we review something, we do it big as much as possible. You guys take care of yourselves. Definitely make sure you comment down below what you think of this fight. What you think about the Shikai of our Kenpachi. and how will things go forward. Definitely make sure you like the video. Make sure you guys are subscribed because we'll definitely go over this anime and several others in the future. You guys be safe, take care, and Lord willing, I'll see you next time. Bye-bye for now. Make sure to check out the extra content on our Patreon page, and thanks to our current patrons.
This ain't what you want, bitch, I'm a fucking phenomenon.